This is Robert of MayflowerBookshop.com, and we are returning to Man in the World of Stars, Rudolf Steiner, and we're going to the December 30th lecture, the day and evening before the Goetheanum was burnt down after the last lecture. This is a lecture before the last lecture, and we're looking to see if there's something in this talk that led to that burning down, that triggered somebody's negative emotions. And here's Steiner talking, for the Anthroposophical Society is not understood by one who belongs to it, unless his attitude is that he can be a counselor and helper of this religious movement, but cannot directly immerse himself in it. If he were to do so, he would be working for two ends. Firstly, for the ruin and destruction of the Anthroposophical Society. Secondly, to make fruitless the movement for religious renewal, which is the Christian community, by the way. All the movements which arise among humanity in a justifiable way must indeed work together as in one organic whole. But this working together must take place in the right way. In the human organism, it is quite impossible for the blood system to become nervous system, or for the nervous system to become blood system. The several systems have to work in the human organism distinct and separate from one another. It is precisely then that they will work together in the right way. It is therefore necessary that the Anthroposophical Society, with its content Anthroposophy, shall remain unweakened in any way by the other movement, and that one who understands what the Anthroposophical movement is should not, in any presumptuous, arrogant sense, but as one who reckons with the task of the age, be able to see that those who have once found their way into the Anthroposophical Society do not need a religious renewal. It's kind of like the Templars didn't need to go to communion because they were constantly in a state of communion. It's like being an adult, a spiritual human adult, yeah. Okay, back to Steiner. He's saying that, so whether it's like Waldorf education or the religious renewal or eurythmy, I mean, I'm assuming that he's talking like he does later, that Anthroposophy and the Outline of Occult Science and the Rosicrucian Wisdom, Theosophy of the Rosicrucian, Theosophy book, these main teachings are critically important. The philosophy of freedom, Christianity as a mystical fact. These principles of Anthroposophy are the heart of the whole thing, the heart-mind of the whole thing. Then come these other... Okay, so then Steiner, that one reckons with the task of the age to be able to see that those who have once found their way into the Anthroposophical Society do not need a religious renewal. For what would the Anthroposophical Society be if it first needed religious renewal? But religious renewal is needed in the world, and because it is needed, because it is a profound necessity, a hand was extended to aid in founding it. Matters would therefore go on in the right way if the Anthroposophical Society remains as it is, if those who wish to understand it grasp its essential nature and do not think that it is necessary for them to belong to another movement which has taken what it possesses from Anthroposophy. The Anthroposophical Society remains as it is if those who wish to understand it grasp its essential nature and do not think that it is necessary for them to belong to another movement which has taken what it possesses from Anthroposophy. Although it is true, in a real sense, that Anthroposophy has not founded this movement for religious renewal, but that it has founded itself. I wonder if that means that Steiner's a midwife to it. It's kind of what I'm saying about, if you read Isis Unveiled in the Secret Doctrine and you see so many of the ideas that Steiner furthers, carries on and elaborates. And then you look at Blavatsky in Isis Unveiled, who says that she got it all from Neoplatonism and the ancient mystery schools, the Eleusinian mysteries being the most important. And Manly Haw says that too. And Steiner makes quite a thing about the world mysteries and the Eleusinian mysteries. And that these renewal of the mysteries. Okay, back to Steiner. Anyone who therefore does not clearly distinguish these things and keep them apart is actually the Anthroposophical Society and in the movement from such things as the religious renewal, keep them apart. And keep them apart is actually by becoming lax as regards the essential impulse of the Anthroposophical movement, working for the destruction of the Anthroposophical movement and for the removal of the ground and backbone of the movement for religious renewal. Wow. If anyone who stands on the ground of the movement for religious renewal thinks he must extend this movement to the Anthroposophical movement, he removes the ground from under his own feet. For everything of the nature of cult and ritual is finally bound to dissolve away when the backbone or knowledge is broken. For the welfare of both movements, it is essential that they should be held clearly apart. Therefore, in the beginning, since everything depends on our developing the strength to carry out what we have set our will to do, it is absolutely necessary in these early days that the movement for religious renewal should work in all directions, in circles outside the Anthroposophical movement, that therefore neither as regards the acquisition of material means, in order that the matter be clearly understood, I must also speak about these things, should it encroach on sources which in any event only flow with great difficulty for the Anthroposophical movement, nor, because it does not at once succeed in finding adherents among non-anthroposophists, should it, for example, make proselytes within the ranks of the anthroposophists. In other words, they're getting their members from the Anthroposophical Society rather than from the world. That's heavy duty. Blavatsky had that same exact problem. And Steiner had the problem with the Theosophical Society when Blavatsky died and Annie Besant, but that's a whole other story. But here's Steiner complaining here about it. Complaining or trying to make it really clear with some pretty hard wisdoms and truths, right? Facts. Okay, Steiner. He's complaining that if the renewal gets their members from the Anthroposophy movement and from the Anthroposophical Society, it's not good. Or money. Were it to do so, it would be doing something that would inevitably lead to the destruction of both movements. It is really not a matter today of going forward with a certain fanaticism, but of being conscious that we can do what is necessary for man only when we work out of the necessity of the thing itself. What I am now stating as consequences were also equally the preliminary conditions for lending my assistance in the founding of the movement for religious renewal. For only under these conditions could I assist it. If these preliminary conditions had not been there, the movement for religious renewal would never have originated through my advice. Therefore, I beg you to understand that it is necessary for the movement for religious renewal to know that it must adhere to its starting point, that it has promised to look for its adherents outside the sphere of the Anthroposophical movement, for it is there that they can be found in the natural way, and there, outside the movement, there they must be sought in the world. What I have said to you has not been said because of any anxiety lest something might be dug away from the Anthroposophical movement, and it has certainly not been said out of any personal motive, but solely out of the necessity of the case itself. And it is also important to understand in what way alone it is possible to work rightly in each of these spheres of activity. It is indeed necessary that with regard to important matters, we should state quite clearly how the case stands, for there is at the present time far too great a tendency to blur things and not to see them clearly. But clarity is essential today in every sphere. If therefore someone were to exclaim, the very one who himself put this movement for religious renewal into the world now speaks like this, well, my dear friends, the whole point is that if I had any time spoken differently about these things, is that if I had at any time spoken differently about these things, I should not have lent a hand towards founding this movement for religious renewal. It must remain at its starting point. What I am now saying, I am of course saying merely in order that these things may be correctly understood in the Anthroposophical Society, and so that it shall be said, as is reported to have happened already, the Anthroposophical movement did not get on very well, and so now they have founded the movement for religious renewal as the right thing. That's not what's going on, Steiner's saying. Steiner says, I am quite sure that the very excellent and outstanding individuals who have founded the movement for religious renewal will oppose any such legend most vigorously, and will also sternly refuse to make proselytes within the Anthroposophical movement. But, they're getting their members from there. But as has been said, the matter must be rightly understood within the Anthroposophical movement itself. I know, my dear friends, that there are always some who find it unpleasant to hear explanations such as these, which are necessary from time to time, not in order to complain in one direction or another, nor for the sake of criticism, but solely in order to present something once and for all in its true light. I know there are always some who dislike it when clarity is substituted for nebulous obscurity. But this is absolutely essential for the welfare and growth of the Anthroposophical movement, as well as for the movement of religious renewal. The movement for religious renewal cannot flourish if it in any way damages the Anthroposophical movement. This must be thoroughly understood, especially by anthroposophists, so that whenever it is necessary to stand up for the rights of the matter, they may really be able to do so. When, therefore, there is any question about an anthroposophist's attitude toward religious renewal, he must be clear that his attitude can only be that of an advisor, that he gives what he can give in the way of spiritual possessions, and when it is a case of participating in the ceremonies, that he is conscious of doing so in order to help these ceremonies on their way. Yeah, sometimes you got to help people out. Is that a joke? Okay. And that he gives what he can in the way of spiritual possessions. And when it is a case of participating in the ceremonies, that he is conscious of doing so in order to help these ceremonies on their way. He alone can be a spiritual helper of the movement for religious renewal, who is himself first a good anthroposophist. But this movement for religious renewal must be sustained in every direction by persons who, because of the particular configuration and tendencies of their spiritual life, cannot yet find their way into Anthroposophical society itself. But this movement for religious renewal must be sustained in every direction by persons who, because of their particular configuration and tendencies of their spiritual life, cannot find their own way into the Anthroposophical society itself. I hope that none of you will now go to someone who is doing active work in the movement for religious renewal and say, this or that has been said against it in Dornoch. Nothing has been said against it. In love and in devotion to the spiritual world, the movement for religious renewal has been given counsel from out of the spiritual world, in order that it might rightly found itself. But the fact must be known by anthroposophists that it has founded itself out of itself, that it has formed, not, it is true, the content of its ritual, but the fact of its ritual out of its own force and its own initiative, and that the essential core of the anthroposophical movement has nothing to do with the movement for religious renewal or Christian community. Certainly no wish could be stronger than mine that the movement for religious renewal shall grow and flourish more and more, but always in adherence to the original intentions. Anthroposophical groups must be changed into communities for religious renewal, either in a material or in a spiritual sense. I was obliged to say this today, for as you know, counsel and advice had to be given for a cult, a cult whose growth in our present time is earnestly desired by me, in order that no misunderstanding should arise in regard to this cult, when I speak tomorrow of the conditions of the life of cult in the spiritual world, I felt it necessary to insert these words today as an episode in our course of lectures. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, see, the esoteric school, like the first class, is that you're a representative of man. You're representative of the human. You're representative of the Anthroposophical Society in the world. And in Blavatsky's Esoteric School of Theosophy, EST, of which which the Foundations of Esotericism series of talks are Rudolf Steiner's being the head of the Esoteric School of Theosophy. Those are his talks, Foundation of Esotericism. Later, he does the Foundation Stone as a new mystery school and his first class. But originally, the Theosophical Society had the same problem, that after Blavatsky died, the same leaders of their secret schools and esoteric schools and their inner schools were the same leaders as ran the World Theosophical Society. And that is a problem. That's a problem with the Anthroposophical Society. They say they can be objective, but the same people are running all these different esoteric. They think they're the Count Saint Germain in some ego trip of passion to know everything and be everything and give everything. And God bless them. But the goddess blesses those who are wise. And whether we get credit or not, whether we have position or not, the smallest pure spiritual thing amongst us affects the furthest stars and the biggest things. The top of the pyramid is held by the bottom. The bottom is held in its aspirations and its future by the point at the top, guided by the pole star. A metaphor for all this. Okay, so what I'm saying is, I think Tennyson had that poem, this disturbing of a flower is troubling of a star, or vice versa. Troubling of a flower is the disturbing of a star. The idea is to get the idea, and not, because remember, Rudolf Steiner said that the people who quote him exactly are Ahrimanic. Ahriman works through the people who never misquote Anthroposophy. He also says that the people who are the pillars of the Anthroposophical Society or the Theosophical Society or these different spiritual groups, but that the people who are the pillars, without them, the whole thing would fall down of the Anthroposophical Society. These pillars, these pivotal people, are most often folks who flunked and didn't succeed in their initiation process in previous life, that they had entered the mystery schools of initiation, very likely in the Eleusinian mysteries or the Greek mysteries or the ancient pagan mysteries. They introduced themselves to the mystery schools and were partially initiated, and they learned secrets that the mass public didn't know. In the ancient Greek mystery schools, if you revealed the secrets, you were put to death. That's how they put to death Socrates. They told him that he was revealing the mystery school secrets. And so Steiner said that these folks couldn't leave the temple because they couldn't go back into the public because they knew too much, and they stayed alive and they failed their initiation. Well, these are the people that reincarnated as the pillars of the Anthroposophical and Theosophical Society, and the heads of self-realization, the head of the Hindu and yoga schools, and the heads of all the spiritual churches and religions became authorities rather than self-evident truth that would heal us all and bring us all together at one round table where we all shared one God, one spirit, one truth, and one love that blessed each and every part that's diverse, that's one and all, one for all and all for one. Yeah, I think you get the picture. I'm kind of making this up as we go based on the things I see, but somewhere in you'll see the right way to put it and how to act toward the one blessing the many. The many, the most for the many, and the many for that idea of the oneness that permeates us all in greater truth and love and spirit. So bless your heart, and we'll continue by looking at that next talk. the next talk in Man in the World of Stars is the talk given when Rudolf Steiner must have been in an unbelievable spiritual mood and mode that he must have known it was all going to go down. And that after the burning of the Goetheanum, he immediately kept lecturing and sharing his spiritual knowledge. And he laid the foundation stone of the new, invisible, all-permeating Goetheanum. The new Anthroposophical society was laid in the hearts of the members. In a threefold spirit, soul, body, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Father, Christos mind, universal mind, Holy Spirit, meeting that fourth earth, the human being I am, making the turning point in time and returning the gift of love and truth and awareness, consciousness to the whole universe. And we're going to go into this. I've gone into other talks into the foundation stone meditation and its importance to the future and to the true meaning of anthroposophy. Theosophy is the wisdom of deity or God. Anthroposophy is the wisdom of the human. And I mentioned before too how consciousness, soul is mentioned in the secret doctrine, and spirit self, life spirit, all this terminology, the etheric, the astral, the reincarnating ego, all these terminologies, Steiner resuscitated from the from the sleeping in the Theosophical Society. It's all connected. That's the point. It's all connected. So next time we're going to go, I want to read this lecture, Spiritual Knowledge is a True Communion. The beginning of a cosmic cult suitable for human beings of the present age. Given on New Year's Eve, 1922 going into 23, Dornach, Switzerland. The lecture right before the fire broke out and destroyed the first Goetheanum, which was an amazing place built out of the help of thousands of people around the world from wood from all over. A building built without the sound of a hammer, they would say. It might be literal, but it might be metaphorical. They didn't use nails. They put this together as like not a Solomon's temple, but a grail cup, a head and a heart of the Christos and the Hermes Christos Sophia, that each of us could awaken to our right mind and heart and will. And each of us is critically important in our deep stillness and our active thinking, feeling, and willing. Each of us is so critical to what's going to happen. The heavens have emptied out of reincarnating egos. And there's so many people on the planet now because each person, by the way they live, is the vote of what is going to happen into the future of America and the world around us. The future of the world and China and Russia and everywhere, England. Each, by the way we behave, by the way we act, out of our deepest, highest ideal and spiritual and soul and the flowering of our intelligence, each person is on the planet now, and even invisible spiritual souls are here from the past, present, and future to see what's going to happen. Are we going to become too spiritual and luciferic? Are we going to become too hardened like Ahriman, kind of almost what they call satanic? Are we going to awaken to our Hermes Christ, Sophia? Are we going to realize that there's no God unless we prove it by the way we live? Are we going to come to realize and rise in the daylight of higher love, compassion, and truth? These are just words, but when they enter our thinking, feeling, and willing, we incarnate them. And then we learn from our mistakes to do better next time. And that next time is the very next moment after we part from here. So I bid you adieu. This is Robert at MayflowerBookshop.com. Bless your heart, soul, mind to go forward, to discover all that's worth living for, and to become, and do, and be able to listen to the next step before us. Bless your hearts.